For the Conservative and Labour parties, the 1959 election was business as usual. But for the Liberals, it was another fight for survival. In 1906, they were in government with 397 MPs, but with every subsequent election, their numbers collapsed. By 1955, they had only 6 MPs left. Enter Jo Grimond. He became leader of the Liberal Party in 1956 and led them to its first electoral gain since 1929. The Torrington by-election of 1958 was the first sign that perhaps it wasn't all over for the Liberals. In 1959, they fought almost half the seats and got 5.9% of the vote, doubling their 1955 share of the poll. Although they lost Torrington, they gained the neighbouring seat of North Devon, keeping their handful of 6 seats. But Grimond remained a popular leader, a new kind of Liberal who got his party on the march. In July 1959, 3 months before the general election, the Liberal leader appeared on the BBC's press conference programme and was given the same firm but polite treatment as Hugh Gaitskell, this time by Kenneth Harris from The Observer, Sydney Jacobson of the Daily Mirror, and Charles Curran of the Evening News.
Press conference. Tonight's guest is Jo Grimond, MP, leader of the Liberal Party. Facing him in the studio are 3 journalists. Sydney Jacobson, political editor of the Daily Mirror, Charles Curran of the Evening News, and Kenneth Harris of the Observer.
It was after the last election, wasn't it?
Mr. Grimond, it's very good of you to come along tonight at the end of a very busy parliamentary session. Could I ask you to begin with whether you agree with the adjective that Mr. Bevan applied to this session, namely the squalid Parliament?
It isn't the adjective I would have chosen myself, but I wouldn't entirely dissent from it. I think it's an irrelevant Parliament. I think the government have directed attention away from the most important things, and on the whole have got away with it.
Do you think that it's been a dreary Parliament?
In bits, but not entirely. After all, we had resignations of 3 ministers in the Treasury, and Lord Salisbury in the House of Lords. We had Suez, and now we've had the African affair. Not entirely dreary, no. Dreary patches, but not entirely dreary.
Well, you don't seem to have liked this Parliament very much. Are you looking forward to the next one and to the general election, which will precede it?
I'm looking forward to the next Parliament, certainly.
And the election?
The election I'm looking forward to, yes, certainly.
Why are you looking forward to that?
Because I think we shall do better.
Tell me, Mr. Grimond, how many candidates do you propose to run at the next election?
Around about 200.
No more. So that means that 2/3 of the seats will not be contested by Liberals at the next election.
That will be true. We may put up a few more. But on the whole, if we contest the seats we're really going to do well at,
yes,
and show we mean business, I think that's the best thing we can do.
So that if you put up 200 candidates, that means what? £300,000 in deposits, doesn't it? If my arithmetic's right.
That's an entirely irrelevant matter to us.
I was going to ask you, are you going to do anything about insuring against the loss of deposits?
Quite unnecessary.
You don't think it's necessary to insure at all?
Quite unnecessary.
There's going to be no party insurance against it?
Not by us. I don't know about the other parties.
No, but as far as you're concerned, you have before
I
insured.
couldn't speak for the Tories.
But as far as you're concerned, no insurance?
No insurance.
Now tell me, Mr. Grimond, if you're going to put up 200 candidates only, even if, and I suppose you'd agree it would need a miracle for them all to be elected, a miracle in the theological sense, it means, doesn't it, that even if all the people who have the chance of voting Liberal do vote Liberal, there is no earthly prospect of their having a Liberal government.
And you think the only importance in an election is to elect a government?
Oh, no, but...
This, if I may say so, is an entirely un-British point of view. We elect a House of Commons.
Yes.
We elect a House of Commons to influence the government, to criticise it, to represent the views of the people in Britain.
Yes.
We don't have the American system, or even the fascist system.
No, I'm not disputing with you. No, I'm really trying to improve my mind about it.
Well,
you are simply saying that saying simply this, that people cannot vote Liberal with any hope of a Liberal government.
Not this time.
How many seats do you hope to get at the next election? You've 6 now. How many do you think you'll get at the next election?
Oh, I think 3 times that, perhaps.
18.
18.
Probably.
So that nearly 200, more than 150 of these candidates will lose.
Very likely.
Now you say in one of your Liberal publications that there's a great movement afoot, sweeping the country which is liable to absorb millions and millions of young people. But even though this great movement is afoot, you still think you'll only get 12 extra seats at the next election.
It takes time.
How long?
How long is it going to take then?
It may take 10 years.
To get how many seats?
To get to the position in which we either form the main opposition or the government.
Do you think you can do that in 10 years?
I think we might well do. I think all the issues today are liberal issues.
Yes.
The issues in Africa are liberal issues about how we treat individuals.
Mr. Grimond, I'd like to ask you this. You've got 6 seats in the present Parliament,
That's
in the
right.
present House of Commons, and out of those 6 seats, 2 appear to me to be entirely dependent on local electoral pacts for the Conservative Party.
Not pacts, no.
Well,
What would
call
you-
them
what-
pacts or call them arrangements.
What
But
word would
Well,
you
I don't
use?
call them either.
What would you use?
If other parties choose not to fight seats, that is their lookout. After all, in the old days, it was quite common. When the Labour Party began, we did certainly not oppose every Labour member.
Don't you concede anything at all in return for them not fighting?
Nothing.
What advice, Mr. Grimond, would you give to a Liberal in a constituency where there is no Liberal? Would you advise him to vote Tory or to vote Socialist?
I should go and tell him to go and see the candidates,
You
as
wouldn't.
it is right as an elector,
You-
to ask them what they think about Africa, about industrial relations, about defence, about foreign policy, and to make up his own mind according to their answers.
What would you do? Supposing if in the constituency where you have a vote there was no Liberal, for whom would you vote?
I should go and ask the candidate, and if he was in favour of this country not making the atom bomb, if he was in favour of this country going into international organisations in the way we want to go in, if he's in favour of wider ownership in industry and proper treatment of the Africans in Africa, I would vote for him.
Mr. Grimond, I'd like to take that point up, particularly the H-bomb point. Now, it seems to me that on some topics, like the H-bomb, you're well to the left even of Frank Cousins. On others, you're well to the right of the Labour Party, such as nationalisation and some aspects of the welfare state. Doesn't that add up to rather a ragbag of policies?
I think not. I don't think it means the right now to think that nationalisation is a dead issue. I don't think the Labour Party thinks it's a particularly live issue. I don't see any enthusiasm in the Labour Party to campaign
Well,
about
the Labour Party is
nationalisation.
committed to nationalisation of 2 major
Well, it
industries.
keeps it as far under the blanket as it possibly can. I've never heard a Labour candidate who came out with a great roaring speech about nationalisation
It's contained in all their policy documents.
in the back pages.
Not necessarily, no.
Well, pretty far to the back. Which industries, apart from the ones that are already nationalised, are they going to nationalise?
Steel and road transport.
And that's all.
Yeah.
No more.
No,
No
they're
more.
committed to
No
those
more.
2, and they may do others.
And the only reason they're in favour of them is because they're committed to them.
Well, as between the 2 parties, if you've got to choose one or other as the lesser evil, which would you choose?
I reckon our role in politics today is twofold. First of all, to get more and more votes, more and more candidates, more and more members of Parliament who are Liberal. Secondly, to stop either of the other 2 parties from committing follies.
You've
Which
been
of them-
saying in your recent publications, the Liberal News particularly, Mr. Grimond, that the Labour Party won't speak out on any of the great issues. Now, surely the Labour Party has been speaking out on Africa in the last couple of weeks, isn't that the case?
It has been speaking out on Africa, I would agree, in the last couple of weeks.
Well, can
it
you
did speak out when it was in power.
Can you reconcile the fact that the Labour Party has made quite a fuss over Africa in the last few months with your statement that the Labour Party can't speak out on great issues?
I wasn't aware I'd made this statement, but on the whole, I'm prepared to say that the Labour Party in power took a rather different attitude about Africa than it did in opposition.
Are you aware that you said also in the Liberal News that the Labour Party isn't able to argue in public about the H-bomb?
I think that is true.
Well, how do you reconcile with the fact that both Mr. Gaitskell and Mr. Cousins have appeared on this programme and have argued about it in public?
They're perfectly able to argue with each other in public. What I complain about is that we have a parliament in which these issues are meant to be argued out.
What are
And
the
I have not noticed any enthusiasm in the Labour Party for raising this matter in Parliament and arguing with the Tories about it.
What did the Liberals say about Africa in the House of Commons this last week?
They weren't called.
Why not?
I couldn't tell you, Mr. House Speaker.
Why, but isn't that rather a deplorable position? I saw that you'd put down an amendment to the government motion on the Devlin report, and the amendment was not called. I mean, do you take that lying down, or are you
We
going
don't
to
take
make
it
a fuss
lying
about
down, but we do not call the speakers in Parliament.
But what step are you taking? Any steps to make public any protest against the fact that you were not called?
We have made a protest, yes,
A protest to whom?
to the Speaker.
Oh, have you? What kind of protest?
Well, we have pointed out that we think we ought to have been called, but I'm bound to say on his behalf, and he will follow, this is not my responsibility at all, that he has a difficult job. He has got to fit in a variety of speakers. He did call us on the debate last week. He asked me about this week. On the future of the Federation, I spoke. And we had a spokesman ready to speak this week. The Speaker, I mean, I'm not here to criticise him at all. He has to call he has to make room for a lot of people in these debates, and a lot more people want to speak than are able to speak.
Had you had a chance to speak in the debate on the Devlin report, what would your spokesman have said that the Labour Party didn't say?
I couldn't say what you said the Labour Party didn't say if we take the whole of the Labour Party. What I think we would have pointed out is that we have been against federation from the start. We've never been in favour of federation, or including Iceland in the federation.
On the Whole of Camp report now, for instance, Mr. Grimond, where is the position of the Liberal Party different from that of the Labour Party?
So far as some members of the Labour Party are critical of the handling of the government of the Whole of Camp, I don't think we do differ. Our object is not to differ from every party on every issue.
Well, why do you make such an issue of the fact that you do differ from the Labour Party, and why do you accuse them of being unable to speak on these great issues, as you put it?
Because we think on some issues we do differ from them, very important issues. The issue of defence as against the Tories. It has been pointed out by the Minister of Defence that the Labour Party are 99% on the same side as the Tories are on defence, on foreign policy. You have Mr. Wilson saying that in his view it would be a great pity, virtually, that Britain should go into supranational organisations. Now we think we must pool our sovereignty. There is a clear difference to the Labour Party. On industrial relations, our view is that we want a wider spread of property. We neither want to leave property and the control of industry in private hands, a few private hands, nor to nationalise it.
Could we turn
on these great issues, we differ from both the other parties.
But
there may be some issues on which we don't.
Could we turn then to
If
domestic
you're a minority
affairs?
party, and you don't see any hope, as you've said yourself, of becoming the government after the next general election, it's a little easier to be the odd man out all the time, isn't it?
So it's said. But have you ever tried to be the odd man out? It's quite a difficult job when you come down to being it. The Labour Party wants the odd man out. They started in this way, and they worked out to being the main man in. Now that's our object.
You want, in other words, to displace the socialists as the opposition to the anti-Tory party in
We
this
want to
country,
see in
do
this
you?
country an opposition party
To the Tories.
which is concerned about liberal issues from a progressive point of view. We believe that is coming.
And do you regard the Labour Party as having fulfilled whatever purpose it had? Do you regard it as
To a great extent,
moribund?
yes. I think socialism is now not the great issue.
How do you explain this then, Mr. Grimond? A newspaper made an inquiry in May of Liberals, asking them who they would have voted for if they hadn't been able to vote Liberal at previous by-elections. And I think it was 45% said Tory and 47% said Labour. Now, how can you reconcile that with your statement that a great many people are fed up with the Labour Party and are likely to vote for you, since they seem to split 50-50?
I don't think I have to reconcile it. The Labour Party themselves are worried, surely, about their lack of appeal to the new voters. Here we have a Conservative government in office for how long? 8 years?
Yes.
Won 2 elections, and yet very doubtful whether they will be turned out the next election. That alone should alarm the Labour Party. Secondly, in our own showing, more people who say they would vote Liberal would vote Labour if there's no Liberal candidate.
So
now
do
that
you-
is a big change over recent years.
Do you expect, Mr. Grimond, to get the bulk of your votes from people who would otherwise vote Tory or who would otherwise vote Socialist? What sources do you see for these votes? Are they from, are you making an appeal primarily to the kind of people who would otherwise vote?
To the new voters, I would say, to the people who possibly have not made up their minds, who perhaps have just come out the register.
What exactly are you going to appeal to the new voter with? What is the greatest specific issue with which you're going to come forward and say to the new voter, this is what we offer you, which neither the Labour Party nor the Conservative Party offer you?
I should say we have a certain approach to politics which appeals to them. That approach, I think, is an honest approach. We don't stand for the interests, either particularly the trades unions or the employers. We stand for the individual. We stand for making use of the new technical age in the name of the individual. We stand for a new approach to defence on the H-bomb. We stand for a new approach to the position of this country in the world and the lead which it can give to the world.
Well, let me bring these noble generalities down a little nearer to the doorstep level, Mr.
Good.
Grimond. Let us take your attitude to the welfare state. Are you broadly in favour of maintaining it, or as it stands, or are you in favour of making any radical changes in it?
Depends what we call by radical.
Well,
We are in favour of maintaining its basic outlines. We think, for instance, that at the moment there is a great case for altering the unemployment regulations. For instance, we think that people who lose their jobs now largely lose it through changes in technique, changes in demand and so forth, and not through a total failure of purchasing power. And we ought to help these people, to retrain them, to give them capital advances to move and that sort of thing.
when you say we, do you think that the government should do this, or do you think that the trade unions, or by collective bargaining, ought to make the employers do it?
I think, as is general throughout the welfare state, this ought to be a joint operation.
You don't think that it's primarily a matter for the unions?
No, I think the government must play their part too.
I was reading your book on the future of liberalism, the passage on the welfare state, and it seemed to me, if I may say so, you had rather a Victorian outlook about it. You emphasize the virtues of thrift, and you admit the fact that the welfare state must deal with the direst cases of poverty, but it seemed to me that the sort of standard with which you dealt with the welfare state was that it was only there really to relieve need and nothing more. It was not a recreation of society or redistribution of wealth in any way. Is that correct?
Well, I'm flattered you should read the book, but I might say at the end of my chapter on the welfare state, I pointed out that I was in favour of a national minimum income, that we should pool these welfare services and pay anyone who was in need, whether it was through unemployment or sickness or old age, a national minimum income. Now, I thought that was not a Victorian idea, but I'm bound to say that I think thrift is a very valuable virtue.
Do you think it's right that a lot of old age pensioners at the present moment should have to rely on national assistance to supplement their pension?
Indeed, I don't. We are the only party which consistently recommends an increase in the old age pensions now, and not some remote increase in the remote future.
How much would you increase it to?
At this moment, £3.
An all-round
That's exactly
increase?
what the Labour Party figures.
But they've also built up a vast scheme which will reach its ultimate fruition in the next decade, or at least the next century, rather.
Well, that is the superannuation scheme, and
Well, that's
naturally
their
they
main
take a long time to build up. But in
And
the
do
meantime,
you think it will ever work? Our experience, surely, is these very long-term schemes don't work, but that a concrete, definite pressure now to put up the old age pension now is what is needed.
But I don't see any difference between yourselves and the Labour Party on this, except the Labour Party have a superannuation scheme for the future, and you haven't. Both of you say put up the pension to £3 a week.
Yes, but they don't put their main pressure on this.
Well, they've made it quite clear that this is what they would do.
Yes, but they are the main opposition. They have not been badgering the government day in and day out to do this.
No, I
Are
don't
you in
agree with
favour,
that.
Mr. Grimond, of an all-round increase in the pension? Isn't it the case that if there were an all-round increase in the pension, the bulk of the money would go not to the people in most need, but to the people in less than most need?
I don't agree.
Isn't
There are a
that the
million
case?
old age pensioners, I think, now who draw national assistance.
There are 4 million who don't, aren't there? You're therefore going to give 4/5 of the extra
Yes.
money to people who don't want help and 1/5 only to the people who
No,
do.
I think many of those who don't draw it now still need help.
Do you think that 4 out of every 5 need help?
I think that in a society as rich as we are, we should be able to pay old people £3 a week.
I notice you've had a number of critical things to say about the trade unions, Mr. Grimond. How many members, do you think, of the trades union movement, numbered at about 8.5 to 9 million, are liberals?
Well, we've never counted our members according to what other bodies they belong to. We don't mind whether they're employers or trades unions, Catholics, atheists, Presbyterians or anything else. We've never gone into it in that way, but I would say that quite a lot of trades unions must vote for us.
You said in print that you think that it's time the trades unions improved their methods of finding out what their members want. What's wrong with their present methods?
I think the main thing is that it seems to be very mysterious that this card vote can be cast entirely on one side or the other. Now, I have a great admiration for trades unions, and Liberals gave them their present privileges. And I think they have a great part to play. But if they're going to play properly, they've got to convince the public at large that when they say that, for instance, the municipal and general workers are against Mr. Gateskill on the hydrogen bomb, that they're really in a position to speak for all the people who are municipal and general workers.
And are you claiming at the moment that the union leaders are not in a position to speak for their members?
I strongly suspect that they are not, and this is borne out surely by the unions themselves, because I understand this union is going to hold another conference with the hope of reversing its view on this particular issue.
Well, it seems
That's a
to be a rather
particular one.
democratic process.
What I'm
I have
getting
no
at,
objection
Mr.
to that.
Grimond, what I'm getting at is this. You have said that the trades unions must improve their methods of trying to find out what their members want.
Yeah.
Now, on what basis are you criticizing those methods?
I think on the method, as I say, of the card vote.
A
And
card
surely
vote,
it is
Mr.
probably-
Grimond, isn't that a method of casting a vote? Isn't it communication that you're criticizing?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. If you mean that I don't think the leaders are always in as close contact with their members as they might be, and then I agree with you.
On what basis do you come to that conclusion? Are you a member of a union yourself?
I'm not, no. But I have many friends in the unions. I know them. I have contacts with them. And I think it's common knowledge that on strikes, on these big questions of politics, it is not always possible for the unions.
Could you
Well,
suggest
they will
an
admit it.
improvement? Could you suggest an improvement in the methods then that will deal with this evil that you suspect exists?
Yes, I think the unions themselves have suggested methods. I think they should be in closer contact with their rank and file. I think everyone agrees it would be highly desirable if they insisted upon a minimum representation at union meetings before decisions were taken, and if they, in general, devolved power down to the shop floor.
Yeah, well,
This is
But one of the
said-
great complaints against the trade union movement at the moment is that too much power has devolved on shop stewards. But let me ask you another question. Do you think that every trade union should, by legislation, have to have a ballot before it has a strike?
I would much rather see this come from the unions, but I think in principle it is highly desirable, yes, to find out from the union members if they really want a strike before we have a strike.
Well, you know that most very experienced industrial negotiators think that this would be fatal because it would be almost impossible to put the terms of the question in such a way as to preclude a strike.
Well, I know that, but I think this is underestimating the intelligence of the ordinary working man. Well, he knows to a great extent what strikes are about, and I think his opinions are discoverable.
When you, apart from this, Mr. Grimond, are you in favour of making any changes in the law about trade unions? Are you, for instance, in favour of altering the law so that the trade unions have to contract in instead of contracting out?
Yes, I am.
You are. So that the Liberal Party, if it became the government, would change the law about the unions in that respect.
As far as I'm concerned, I can't speak for the party as a whole, but
yes, but as the leader of the party, you say that you want. Now, what other changes, if any, would you make in the law about trade unions?
Well, I think one must go to the unions and say, okay, you have an enormous part to play.
But you'd alter the contracting in and contracting out basis without whether the unions liked it or whether they wouldn't.
I think that is a point, that if the unions are going to have a privileged position in the state, as they have, and in my mind they're entitled to, then this is a reasonable point to make. That if they're going to have that position, they ought to have contracting in instead of contracting out.
By a legislation, you would alter the law so that they have no option. Now, would you alter the law in any other respect? Would you alter the law about picketing, for instance?
Not unless it's abused.
Well, as it stands, would you change the law as it now stands? Would you want to make any changes in the law as it is now?
I dare say there are occasions upon which peace picketing may be abused, but in general, no.
So that you wouldn't wish to change the law there? No. Any other way in which you wish to change it about trade unions?
Well, as I say, I think it would be highly desirable that the trade unions, if they're going to have their privileged position, should alter their own procedure. And I would certainly attempt to get them to alter it. Now, if they refuse to alter it in any way, I wouldn't commit myself now to saying that by legislation they should be compelled to alter it in particular directions. But in general, I think a country which gives them a privileged position as we do has a right in return to ask the unions that they shall assure the country when they speak in the name of their members, they really are entitled to do so.
Mr. Grimond, coming off the unions for a moment, would you agree that one thing that every voter wants from his political party is efficiency? They want to make sure that the alternative, the party for which they vote, isn't a well-run party.
They must be desperately disappointed, but I would agree.
Now, some of us here were at the Liberal Party conference in Torquay last year, and we were very disappointed ourselves with the organisation of that conference. What have you done to improve the administration
and
organisation?
This year. But let me say this about political conference. What do you want from a political conference? This is not running the government. It is really absurd to expect a party which holds an annual political conference at which it gives freedom, as far as the Liberal Party is concerned, to all its different segments.
No, I wasn't criticising the argument and the debates. I was criticising the organisation. And my feeling was that a party which can't even organise its own annual conference so that people know what is being talked about at the moment is really not in a fit state to offer itself to the electors as an alternative opposition or an alternative government.
Surely the criticism in fact was that all sorts of diffuse opinions were expressed. I was there. I didn't notice anything terrible about the organisation of the conference.
Well, I was there throughout the conference, and I did, and I think Kenneth Harris did too.
Isn't it the case that the Liberal Party went on record one afternoon about a very important issue, agreed in private later in the day that the decision was in fact against the sense of the Assembly, and the next day took steps to reverse the decision?
And has this never happened before? I seem to remember an occasion when Mr. Churchill came down to the House of Commons and forced them to reverse the decision on equal pay for women.
But this isn't a party thing, it's a party conference. We ought to be being asked about whether this is the way to run a party conference.
But surely,
you may be able to say this
is no way to in a party conference.
You may say this is no way to run the House of Commons either, but then two blacks don't make a white or even a pink, do they?
No, but it's unfair, I think, to accuse us of being spectacularly inefficient. And in fact, far worse things happen in other parties and the House of Commons itself. Now, I regard a party conference as an occasion upon which the rank and file have a right to express their own views. But let me offer you all an invitation to come this year, and you will see an excellent.
I'm sure we accept that.
Sure we agree, yes, we do.
Well, you think you have a lot of capable people?
Could I
ask you this? Could
I ask you this question, Mr. Grimond? Now, who exactly are the Liberals? I think the average voter has a sense that, on the whole, the Conservative Party represents to a very great extent the employer, and on the other hand, to a very great extent, the Labour Party represents the worker. Now, who exactly do you think the Liberal Party represents?
But this is our great strength, you see. We don't represent the employer. We don't represent the old sort of traditional cloth-capped worker. We represent the new chap who's coming out of the schools, highly educated, technically equipped, doesn't feel himself to be a sort of oppressed member of the proletariat, equally doesn't feel himself to be a boss. We represent the new class which are coming up in this country.
And how many members of the new class are going to be Liberal candidates for the next election?
Now that I couldn't say, but quite a lot.
Quite a lot of them, are they? I mean, when I look through the people who are going to be Liberal candidates, I wonder where, in fact, you're going to get the electorate to support you on the ground that you have got a party that looks competent. The quality of the candidates, surely, from the point of view of the ordinary voter, when he thinks of the Liberals, he thinks of you and Mark Bonham Carter, but whom else does he think
Well,
of?
it doesn't know harm if he thinks of those two.
but he can't
if I may
just
say
stop
so,
there.
evidence of by-elections is that they think rather better of Liberal candidates than they have done for a very long time. Our vote has gone up. Our candidates have been young, lively, and attracted attention. I don't say that all these new people have enough money or the position to stand for Parliament at once, but on the evidence of by-elections, we're not doing too badly.
And
Well,
yet you don't...
Jacobson.
Coming to this question of yourself and Mr. Mark Bonham Carter, it does seem to some of us who are Liberals with a small L perhaps, that the Liberals with a big L, particularly in Parliament, seem to be rather drawn from a very small clique.
Well, you must join us if you're a Liberal small L. It's high time we became a big L Liberal.
Yes, but I'm not a member of the Asquith family or related to it in any way.
But you
That
can
was the
join
point
it.
I
It's a
was
free,
coming
it's an
to.
open conspiracy. I will speak to my mother-in-law and she will enroll you once.
We hear a great deal about the...
But it's a point, I agree. But I mean, we have got to get away from this, and we are getting away from it. I think you will agree that although we're at a small beginning, we are broadening our base, we're getting more votes, we're getting more attention.
Well, wouldn't you agree, Mr. Grimond, that in fact to the ordinary voter, independent liberalism looks uncommonly like independent television, doesn't it?
Well, I hope it does.
in terms of candidates, I mean.
You say you had a great increase in your membership over the last year or two. Could you give us the figures of this increase in your membership?
I can't give the precise figures as of this evening.
Can you
but
guess?
Could you give us an
Give
idea?
us a guess.
I should think it's gone up. I think our membership is double what it was.
What do you suppose
30
membership
years
is
ago.
now?
Throughout the
Yes.
constituencies?
What did you say as a guess? As the leader of the party, how many members have you got?
I mean, I would say that on the basis of by-elections and so forth and constituencies, which I haven't counted up, we look forward to polling.
That isn't what I'm
30
asking you. How many members have you got? You're the leader of the party, don't you know?
I don't know precisely. No.
Can you guess?
I should think we have getting on for 1 million.
Getting on for 1 million people who pay subscriptions to the Liberal
Our
Party?
members, yeah.
Who pay, how much do they pay?
And they do it voluntarily.
How much do they pay? So they do in the Tory Party. How much do they pay?
They do all pay voluntarily. All
Everybody.
these big
There's
businessmen,
no conscription of wealth.
Don't make statements. Let him answer the question.
But he's asking me a
Well,
question.
they pay a varying amount according to what they can afford. But they pay from half a crown upwards, yeah.
And
You
what's
seem to
the
be pretty
income of the
cheerful
party?
about the next election. You seem to be looking forward to it.
Yeah.
When do you think it's going to be?
Well, until an hour or two ago, I thought it was going to be October. But of
made
course,
you
if
change
Mr.
your mind?
Khrushchev is going to America and all this, it may be put off. But I've been looking forward to the autumn.
Well, do you think Mr. Khrushchev is really going to dictate the date of the
I
election?
think they ought to have an election during the time when he's meeting Mr. Eisenhower and a general summit meeting, maybe in the immediate offing, yes.
From the point of view of the Liberal Party, do you think would you do better in an October election than in a spring election, or doesn't it make any odds? Which would you choose from the point of view of party advantage?
From party advantage, I think possibly the longer it's put off, the more votes we shall get.
What do you think the
My own
election...
personal advantage, I'm geared up for the autumn.
What do you think the election will be about, fundamentally?
The issue of the individual in the modern world.
And in what of the current issues that we've been reading about last month, 6 weeks, do you think that fundamental issue will express itself?
I think it's going to express itself on the old issues of wages, welfare state. I think that's going to be the, so to speak, the bulk of the voters. But the marginal voters, I think, are going to come in on issues like Africa, defence and foreign policy.
Could you tell us how you think you will be spending the bulk of your time between now and the general election?
I shall be spending it in my constituency, bulk of it.
I see you're insuring anyway against an October election.
We are a serious party, and we mean, as I say, to get in at the next election, and every one of us.
You're still not prepared to go beyond your forecast of 18, at the most, 18 Liberal successes at the next election. I think that's a most alarming announcement, you know, from the leader of the
terrifying
party.
to you.
Isn't it?
Terrifying.
Well, it's terrifying to
Wait a minute,
180
now give him
Liberal
a chance
candidates.
to answer the question, Charles. You put 3 in a row.
I don't think it is. The point is this, that you know quite well, and I know quite well, that the one thing which is going to have more effect in politics today than anything else is if the Liberal Party came back at 3 times its present strength, if it greatly increased its votes throughout the country, and if it began coming second in a whole lot of constituencies, as it has been in by-elections, it would terrify the Tory party. And what it would do to the Labour Party, I tremble to think.
Last question, I'm afraid, Mr. Grimond. Just tell us in telegrammatic form what the battle cry of the Liberals is going to be next October, if there is a general election.
Oh, on to a Liberal government, but not at once.
Yet.
But build it up, 5 years, 10 years, and we shall have one.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming along.
What do you want if you don't want money? What do you want if you don't want gold? Say what you want and I'll give it you, darling. Wish you wanted my love, baby.